the whole first half of the 2015 draft might be a washout. I mean, what were the odds of all that happening? So, again, it's so frustrating, and I get frustration with Saints fans because you want to pull your hair out sometimes watching the football team and the kind of luck that they've had. But, I'm a firm believer in that you create your own luck, So, I know you can't help a Kikaha blowing out his knee, for a third straight time, in 4 years, I know you can't help thinking that Garrett Grayson, you flew all the way out Boulder, Colorado to watch him work out, thinking he was going to be the heir apparent to Breeze, and now you find out a year and a half later that, maybe he was a little bit off in that evaluation. You go to Clemson, South Carolina to work out with Stephon Anthony, who you think could be the next great middle linebacker for your franchise. And now a year and a half later, he's on IR or he's on injured reserve, and you find out that maybe his mental capacity for understanding the position that he's playing isn't as great as you thought it was. Phenomenal athlete could play any linebacker position, but how well can he play any linebacker position? Apparently, is the issue with him in grasping it. The scheme apparently is an issue for him. So you just have all these things that are all are just adding up against this football team, and it's very frustrating. You just sit down and evaluate all the things that have happened to this team. It's mind-boggling. And for a team, and Deuce, you and I know when we first started doing our show together, when you first started this very show that people are listening to tonight, that team, that 2014 team, heading into that preseason, the very first show that you and I did, they were Super Bowl contenders. They were getting kicked away the NFC, as you recall. And who would have thought we're sitting here 2.5 years later, and they're about to have their third straight losing season in a row. So, it's been very, very frustrating.
Well, I think that's kind of putting it mildly. I think everybody's a little frustrated with it, but I will say this. I mean, we've preached it all year. There's optimism. I'm looking forward to free agency in the draft. And, I mean, let's be fair. You wrote about it today. There is a chance if 3 teams lose out and we win out that we make it into the playoffs, and then who knows what happens after that. For those who missed the beginning of the show, the Redskins must lose out, Buccaneers must lose out, and the Packers must lose out, and we win out for us to make it into the playoffs. But, hey, crazier things have happened, right? It is New Orleans. So we'll just have to see how that all works.
Let me comment real quick for a second, Rev, because I want to say this because I heard you guys, and Kyle's question was whether or not we should sign Calais Campbell, and both of you guys feel like it may be worth a shot. It's not worth kicking the tires, as they like to say.
Yeah, I wouldn't help them. Not at all.
Mm-hmm. I have a huge problem. I mean, I hate to be the one that, kind of rain on the parade, but I have a huge problem with that. I don't want Calais Campbell anywhere around my team. And it's not that he's not a good player. It's that it's almost as if it's a definition of insanity when it comes to New Orleans Saints. You're doing the same thing over and over, and you're thinking that you're going to get a different result. Can Calais Campbell still produce? He probably could. He's 30 years old. And if the Saints are going to continue with this new movement that they seem to be going in the direction of, when you have a guy like Cam Jordan who hasn't hit, I believe he's right around 27 right now, when you have young guys like Fairley and Rankins and, even Onyemata is producing it, hopefully Kakaha can come back and kind of be that extra help. I won't even call him a prominent player, but just some extra help on passing situations. I don't think the Saints should venture anywhere near Calais Campbell. If you're going to spend money in free agency, maybe Jason Pierre-Paul, and I know you guys are high on Melvin Ingram. If we were playing a 3-4 defense, I'd be high on him as well. But the Saints don't. And I don't trust Melvin Ingram as a 4-3 end. I'm in favor of the Saints building through do not sign Jason Pierre-Paul, Calais Campbell, anyone else that you think can fill the void at defensive end to a big money deal when it never worked out well for you. And I know you can't always base what you do in the future on what happened in the past. No, you can't. but it's a really good indicator of what your strengths and your weaknesses are. And in this case, the same strength is not signing big guys to big money deals in free agency that are around the 30-year-old mark. Build through the draft. Draft the Barnett. Draft the Lawson. And draft one of the Alabama guys. Draft your next defensive end. And let the chips fall where they may. Yes, I know you may have a busted Stephon Anthony. And by the way, I think Andres Pete remains on the left side at left guard. I don't think there's any chance he'll ever play right tackle for the New Orleans Saints. He's more comfortable on the left side. He can kind of slide over for Armstead in the pinch. I never think he sees the right side of the offensive line again. But I do think Ron Leary and some of these other guys can come in and play guard if Landon Turner is not going to be slid into that spot, because he is getting more snaps as that utility guy right now. Right tackle is going to have to be solved. Yes, we've already addressed that. We know that Zach Streets is going to be on his way out very soon. But for me, I don't think Calais Campbell, to answer Kyle's question, should be anywhere near the Saints' radar. If you're going to spend big money, spend it on someone else. Go after Jason Pierre-Paul.
Here's for me. I don't want Calais Campbell because he doesn't fit the team in terms of need. You've got 3 technique defensive tackles who are already doing extremely well, and Nick Fairley and then Sheldon Rankins, who's a first-round pick. So for me, there's just not enough room for him. It's hard enough to have room with Nick Fairley here. If I had to bring in anybody that we're talking about, which you misquoted me, I'm not that high on Melvin Ingram. I had a big argument about that because of him being a 3-4. The only 3-4 that I think could maybe switch in with us and do all right would be Jabal Shiard. But that's neither here nor there. I'd like Jason Pierre-Paul more than any of them if we could get him for not necessarily a discount, but for not a – even if you give him a big contract, don't make the daggum thing guaranteed like we're doing every year. If you want to make him, 3 years, $30 million and give him an elite pass rusher, contract, fine, but don't make $25 million of that guaranteed money. Make 10 of it guaranteed. I can live with $10 million guaranteed and eating that if something fails for a potential elite guy. And the reason I like JPP is even though that hand has been, an issue for people, he's only 27 years old right now, whereas Calais Campbell's going to start the season at 31 next year. 27's, that to me is a good enough range where you can still spend a little money, hopefully get some production 2 or 3 years. I mean, and heck, why do we have to pick and choose? I like both. Sign Jason Pierre-Paul and draft Derek Barnett. See which one does the best and play the one that does the best. I mean, because the Saints are looking around $30 million in cap space this year, and I'm not necessarily saying, mortgage the future away, but if you're really looking at 2017 as the year if we're going to do one last push with Breeze and Payton, go ahead, break the bank, spend all you got, see if you can win it in 1 year and pay for it later, because I'm sorry, in 2009 we could talk about this team possibly being built into a long-time dynasty. That time is over. What we have right now is a potential to buy a 1-year win and then be out of it, kind of like, the Baltimore Ravens were a 1-year and end team because, good free agent pickups, good play by their team. They're one and done. You don't put the Falcons on your Super Bowl contender team since then, and you're definitely not doing it this year. That type of deal. You go in and try to spend as much money as you can and buy it. Chicago Cubs just did it in the Major League Baseball. They went and bought guys like Aroldis Chapman to make it happen. They have young talent. They might be able to do it in 2018, but that's what we got to do. I just don't want to spend it, like you're saying, on old guys like, the Calais Campbell or something like that. But, man, if we can draft, you can't have too many good defensive ends. And when you have 0 at that spot, go ahead and sign one and draft one.
Well, here's what I see, Rev, and I'm going to go with your model versus even mine of just going straight to the draft. If you're going to sign a guy, I know you said JPP would be a great guy to sign, and he's only 27. I agree. What about the guy you love most, or at least one of the guys I've heard you, rave about, and he's somebody I cover often, for the Sports Hangover with the NFC South. If you can weaken a division opponent as well as add to your roster, why would you not do it? Please, give me some Mario Addison and A.J. Klein. If you can sign those 2 guys.
Here's my thing on Addison. The only reason I'm not throwing him in there, now I'm not against signing Addison. I think that he's earned himself a nice payday, but keep in mind he will be 30 years old the start of next season. He's not one of the quote-unquote younger guys. He's talented. I'm not against getting him. But since we were kind of focusing the discussion on avoiding big guys in terms of older guys for big money, I think Mario Addison has earned a decent payday. He's not going to get $10 million or anything, but he could probably get $6-7 million a year. If you're trying to avoid those guys because they're older, might not want to necessarily jump at Addison, but you would definitely weaken the Carolina Panthers even more if you were able to pick him up, and he slides in and fits pretty well in the Saints defense.
Well, which was where I was going with when I said you sign a guy like that, in the idea of you sign him, but you still draft Barnett, knowing that Barnett's going to be the eventual replacement. But as you said, you can never put too many, especially when you have cornerbacks the way the Saints have corners. You can never have too many great pass rushers.
Yeah.
Imagine Cam Jordan or, even with a JPP or a Barnett, and you still have Kikaha who can come in and be that utility guy. If you give him just a couple of maybe 20 snaps, not even 20 snaps, 10, 15 snaps a game, and you give him one assignment, which is see quarterback, hit quarterback. I don't really think it's that difficult for him because, he's not really a reliable guy when it comes to his health. So I think if you give him that role of just being a straight situational pass rusher, he may be able to produce some good numbers. I believe he had 4 sacks and 4 forced fumbles in limited action. So I'd like to see what he can do. But, a guy, that's the type of guys the Saints should want to go after. Not even a Mario Addison, but if you're going to spend big money, go after a JPP who's a proven pass rusher. Don't go after a Calais Campbell.
Yeah, and that's what I'm kind of for. And I would only I think Pierre-Paul is better from the edge than Addison is. Now, I will say, you've mentioned this before, and I really need to watch more of his film from this year. I don't know how his run support is now that hand's injured, so he could get tied up easier because he's not able to use his hands as much. But regardless, with him being younger, a proven pass rusher, you could blow your hand off with a firecracker, but that doesn't mean your speed and your physical power go away. It just means you're not as you might be, I guess you could call it, clumsier. You're kind of beating people with a mallet now instead of using pure technique. But regardless, I think he could contribute. I just don't want to be one of those years where we feel like we got to pick one way or the other. One year we would have 5 draft picks or 4 draft picks, but we'd have money to spend. So we'd go get the, Keenan Lewis, but then we couldn't draft anybody. Or it would be the opposite where, wow, amazing. The Saints actually have 7 draft picks, but we're negative $10 million in the hole. How are we going to make it to next year? This year we can do both. So go ahead, do both. Spend as much money as you can find. I don't care. Spend all $30 million in one season and bring in stuff and just see what happens. Go all in. Push in your chips. Because let's be honest, if Sean Payton puts in another 7-9, 6-10 type season, he's not making it to the end of his contract. He's just not, because Mickey Loomis will lose his job if he keeps him employed with losing. We already know how mad Benson is of how the Pelicans are doing, how that situation's going. Mickey Loomis is as buddy as he's probably become with Sean Payton. He's not going to risk his financial security in his job. So Sean Payton's got to start winning. So y'all got to come together and buy out the bank. Make people come to New Orleans and make something happen in 2017.
For me, I'd like to see the Saints go full-on New York Giants, because we can say what we want to about, Giants being one of the off-season champs. Their results on the field, amazing. Over the last 2 games, I don't even think they have a lot of touchdowns. More or less, you got guys like Olivier Vernon who's producing. They brought in Janoris Jenkins. He's producing. So the Giants have money well spent. And if the Saints can make a similar move, here's an idea: sign Jason Pierre-Paul. Then Tremaine Johnson, who the Saints were actively looking at trying to pursue last year, he's a free agent from the Los Angeles Rams at this point. So now you solved your position at corner, and you solved the pass rusher. And I know I'm just using these names for examples before anybody wants to yell, tweet at me or whatever else that Tremaine Johnson or his stats look like X, Y, and Z. I don't care about that right now. I don't care about the stats right now. I'm talking about simply filling voids, and these are the names that are available to the Saints right now. Talking about guys like Tremaine Johnson. You're talking about guys like, Jason Pierre-Paul. These are some of the guys that are going to be available that the Saints actually have the ability to go get. Ron Leary, again, I'm going to keep throwing that name out there because I know for a fact the Saints were trying to get him. So if you're trying to pursue guys like that, and now you have the ability to, and you don't have to trade for them, go get your guy. You wanted Tremaine Johnson, he's available. Go get him. You wanted Ron Leary, he's available. Go get him. If you really wanted a pass rusher, you just knew you couldn't afford to pay Olivier Vernon $75-80 million. Well, Jason Pierre-Paul is going to be available because they have a young stud after him, and I hate to try to even attempt to pronounce the young man's name. It's African